Good afternoon, class. I am Surprof, and I will be your villain for today. No, just kidding. My name's Christopher Arthur. Good morning, afternoon, or night, class, depending on when you're listening to my video. We are finally at our midterm project, which means we are at the halfway point. During the 5th week, we are supposed to use Tableau to tell a story about data, and I will be using my Tableau skills to tell a story about happiness and life satisfactions around the world. Why is happiness important? It's a question that I will come across eventually, since my final goal is to get my master's in psychology, specifically forensic psychology and criminal psychology. Happiness can be an important factor in many things, ranging from becoming more successful, a better health, being more given, and even being more productive and creative. So my next question would be, what is the essence of happiness? I think the best answer to that question was stated from a website that I read called PositivePhilosophy.com. The author, Courtney E. Ackerman, stated, "Happiness is a state, not a trait. In other words, it isn't a long-lasting permanent feature or personality trait, but a more fleeting, changeable state." So to me, that means that happiness is depending on who you ask. So let's take a look at the map. Let's get a quick idea of happiness around the globe. Looking at the map, you can see from red to blue, which the darker red being closer to 0 while the darker blue being closer to 10. Overall, we can see that most of the planet is pretty happy, except for a lot of nations in Africa, but that's a story for another day. Looking at my first chart, happiness in order, we can see that the top 10 countries with the highest happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, those countries being Finland, Denmark, Switzerland, Ireland, Norway, Netherlands, Sweden, New Zealand, Austria, and Luxembourg. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but that's the best I can do. My goal for this point was to see if I was able to get as close possible to the graph that you're seeing here. See what is contributing factor and what makes these top places the happiest place on earth. So the next chart I went to was social support. In the United States of America, there's always a saying. They always say that social support is very important. Social support in our country is believed to be a deciding factor in happiness. While almost all the countries listed before are pretty high on the charts, all but Luxembourg was highest on the list. What makes it different? From then on, I used my next 3 graphs to try to match happiness graph, depicting in the first graph, happiness in order, and seeing why this country might be a little different from the rest. The next graph was actually quite not very understanding to me. Although each graph didn't show the exact same order as the first graph, I can tell it is still a contributing factor in the country's happiness. My first idea was to put each of the next 3 graphs in one big graph, but doing so would have made the whole graph seem to be very unclear. So I had chose but to show you each graph individually, stating from the freedom to make life choices graph, which is right here in front of you. It is reasonably justifiable to think that those who are able to have freedom to make their own choices in their life would be more considerably happier than those who don't. The graph here shows all 10 of the top countries are pretty much here, although not in the same order as the graph but the fact that they are says much. Moving on to the next graph, the GDP, or gross domestic product, is a metric system that breaks down the country's output by person and calculated by population. Basically, if the country is making money, then that means that it's prosperous, and a prosperous country is most likely to be a happier country. Again, if you look at the graph, all of the countries are in the top few categories. Again, they are not in the same order as the first graph, happiness in order, but again, the fact that they are on the graph states a lot. The final chart is a perception of corruption. Within the country. A corrupt country is not a country for the people. Those who are only thinking about themselves will only drag the country down, making its populace very unhappy. Looking at this chart, we can see the corruption within the top countries are very low, meaning that the people believe in their government, which would mean that the people are very happy with their government. Again, each of the countries are, in fact, in this graph and are very high, which is another factor that can be added on. Although we couldn't find the exact match, I came up with a conclusion. In my conclusion, I believe that the happiness for the country have a list of deciding factor for our evidence in this assignment. Social support, freedom to make life choices, the gross domestic product of the country, and the precipitation of corruption within that country all just comes to be some major factors that can dictate the happiness of a country. It's my belief that if we had some more time, I would probably be able to find more graphs that would add on to what I'm showing you now, such as life expectancy or individual wealth. Maybe that can be explained at another later date. I created a dashboard with all three of the graphs. Sorry if I couldn't make it any bigger, but I felt that for my assignment, these graphs are very important and needs to be placed in a dashboard. The order of happiness of order, the map of the happiness of order, social support, freedom to make life changes, the GDP capita, and precipitation of corruption. Sorry, I have a little lisp, so a lot of P's and S's kind of messes me up. Anyway, this is my assignment. I hope you enjoyed it. This is Christopher Arthur signing off, leaving you with a final question. What does happiness mean to you? Thank you, and have a nice day.